Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. This time, Paradise. Yeah, I know you're there because you're listening to us, but no, it's DS9 Paradise on this episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. Speaking of Paradise, you knew I was going to make this segue. Speaking of Paradise, you could join Paradise. Become a Patreon member. Patreon.com/IABD. Don't take much. Get on board. Get bonus materials. Get sent to you. Get bloopers from the radio show. Get all the radio show exclusives on top of the Trek special episodes and excuses. Yeah. You know what? We got to get to Paradise because I'm losing it. I'm so excited about it as it is. This is Paradise, DS9 on It's All Been Trekked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
Jimmy-Jerome. No Keith. Still. And no special guest this week. That was so great. We had a special guest last week. Again, YouTube channel Metatrek. Thank you so much for coming out.
Yes.
Might be back next week. We're going to see. Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see. We're here to talk Deep Space Nine. The episode is Paradise. What are your first impressions, Steven?
That it was not Paradise. No, that's just a...
Oh, absolutely.
I actually, this, much like last week, this reminded me of previous episodes of TOS and stuff. But I thought, and then it kind of mixed in a Cool Hand Luke and some other things, and we'll get into those deeper. I think I ended up liking it overall. I think a lot of it is because of the, Cisco and O'Brien and Dax and Zero together, always I like. And I thought I really like Gail Strickland in the role, and it gets into, culty kind of stuff and that kind of thing. It takes a similar but different tack to some of the other cult tribal things we've run into on other planets. So I thought it was good. Yeah, I liked it.
Never liked this episode. I never will. I'll never forgive it for the death of my son. No. Seriously, I don't like this episode. I remembered it very well. I do think there are some good elements that I appreciated this time that I did not appreciate in previous viewings. And so I don't hate it as much as I've hated it in the past, but I still don't like this episode. It still is a stinker for me in terms of DS9 Season 2. So it's before DS9 really took off. It's a callback to it could have been in any other Star Trek show. It did not need to be a DS9 episode. And we'll get into some of that. I mean, starting with the very first thing is O'Brien and Cisco are out in a runabout doing a colony survey, but it's not in the Gamma Quadrant. It's clearly in the Alpha Quadrant because these humans have been there for 10 years. So it was before they discovered the wormhole. So why are they the ones out doing the survey? Like, why? I get that they're on the frontier, so they are near some planets that Starfleet would need to check in on. But with DS9 and that wormhole, you don't have time to send the commander of your station out to survey some random planet. You get a starship to do that.
Right.
It just didn't make sense. Well, it'd be one thing if they were in the Gamma Quadrant, but they aren't.
Well, because wouldn't it be Dax and Zero, or Dax and Kira to go out instead?
Yeah, but even then, I don't think DS9's job is to survey the local planets.
That's a good point.
Once that wormhole's found, that is a full-time job.
Yeah. That's a fair point.
You don't go on random planet missions unless you're going through the Gamma Quadrant for some reason.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That said, I enjoyed the opening banner and knowing full well, okay, there's Steven Spielberging us here. They're making it in case you didn't already like these guys, they're talking about, and I like the background on O'Brien, actually. I like that, and that's an aspect of the episode I like, is, kind of the, I didn't know a turbolift from a transporter, which, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, okay, it's a figure of speech. That makes sense. We're talking about curveball and the boy striking him out with a curveball, and the metric system comes up somewhere in there too. So I was like, okay, all right, I'm enjoying this. And then,
that's a conversation. Asking O'Brien to mentor Jake for a possible career path in Starfleet is a very interesting plot point. Jake's not in this episode, so it's really interesting because he's not there. But Jake's development is an interesting path, but I like them mentioning that, of course, a commander assumes his pre-teenage or early teenage son is going to follow his footsteps into Starfleet. I don't think it's a huge spoiler to say Jake is never going to be in Starfleet. That is not Jake's path. But it's very interesting to me that a father at this point would just assume that and start setting him up for that. Which, I'm not saying that's a major point of conflict between Ben and Jake, because I think Ben will support Jake in whatever he does, and Jake ends up having a great career, as we'll see. Even before he's fully an adult, he embarks on the career path. But it just, to me, I was like, oh, that's a miss there, but not in a bad way. I get why you're preparing him, even if he's not going to go that way.
just in case he doesn't get his stuff together.
At this point, Jake's probably still doesn't know what he wants to do. I mean, we've been introduced to him as a kid. Later in the series, saw a very clear direction, but I don't think we've seen that direction yet. And so it makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I still don't know what I want to do besides this podcast.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know what I want to do. I just don't know how to do it. We also get that O'Brien mentions that he was also in the lower third of the class like Jake for mechanical aptitude, which surprised me a lot considering how like he's chief operations, essentially the chief engineer and all that. My favorite part of the opening scene though was we finally got the explanation as to how O'Brien, who was a security grunt, a non-commissioned security officer in a war, ended up as transport chief and engineer. Yeah. And we hadn't connected those dots yet. They'd been laid. We knew the past from Next Gen. We knew where he is now. We knew where he was on Next Gen. But yeah, this connected the dots, and I really liked that. I mean, there are 5 writers on this episode. 3 teleplay by and 2 story by. Wow. So 5 different people touched it. Somebody along the way was probably like, let's finally use this opportunity to connect dots with O'Brien. But I'm glad they did it mid-season 2 instead of waiting until season 7 to figure it out.
Yeah, and that opening scene, again, I said they Spielberg did, but yeah, all those elements we just talked about. I feel like, in a way, it's laying the groundwork for later in the episode, but really, I feel like that's just, like you just said, it kind of connects, like, okay, it's literally like, how'd you end up here? Kind of a thing that we just hadn't seen them have that conversation. Right. I mentioned the writers, so I feel like we should just jump in now and get it over with. The story's by Jim Trombetta and James Crocker. Jim Trombetta is best known for 5 episodes of DS9, this being the 4th of 5. So I guess we've talked about him previously because he had 1 season 1 episode and 2 other season 2 episodes, and he's got 1 more season 2 coming up. Also wrote for The Flash and Voyager and such. And then the other guy, James Crocker, best known for being a producer on DS9 for its first season. And that's honestly, he's got more writing credits than producer, but producer's his primary IMDb title. Also worked on Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, Beauty and the Beast, Simon and Simon. And then the script, or teleplay, was by Jeff King, who's best known for DS9. Even though this was the only episode he wrote on DS9, he only has 2 other writing credits, one before, one after on television episodes. Richard Manning, who was a producer on The Next Generation, so I guess he kind of held over. He was also a producer on Tech War. And then the third teleplay by was Hans Beimler, who we talked about was a producer in DS9. And then directed by Corey Allen, who was a Next Gen director that we're familiar with. So a lot of Next Gen holdover, which I think makes sense because the story felt like it should have been a Next Gen story more than a DS9 story. Yeah, that's a good take.
We got to the planet. We meet these colonists. They've been there for 10 years. And apparently they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
I mean,
I thought, were they Starfleet? Right? No. They were just a separate ship that crashed.
They were humans, so they were Federation, but they were setting out to do a colony. And they didn't get to their destination planet, although they did, but they didn't. And they got stuck.
Yeah. They landed, of course, the comms don't work immediately, which Lower Deck, I think it was this season, they did a whole thing like, they might have done a couple times, but I know very recently, like, oh, what a surprise, our comms aren't working. We're in a cave. Oh, wow. The episode cave,
It wasn't just the comms, it was all their equipment. And I will say, I did go ahead and listen to the Greatest Generation guys, and they pointed out that O'Brien's just like pushing the button and not even looking where the phaser's pointing, which is a really bad move if you're not sure if it's going to work. He's very careless with his phaser. I appreciate the Greatest Generation podcast for pointing that out to me. But yeah, that is there, and they were just the technology not working feels done to death, so I didn't even make a note about that because it's just like dumb.
I like that they bring up the duonetic field, but then after about based on my notes 5 minutes, I'm like, there's something fishy. There's got to be something fishy about this duonetic field.
And it was only halfway interesting because it was artificial. If it had been natural, it wouldn't have been interesting. If you want an interesting read about a planet that can't use electronics because of a natural field. The only, at this point, Star Trek Strange New Worlds novel, High Country, really, really good, where 4 of the officers, I think it's Pike, Spock, Uhura, I don't think it's number one. Maybe it is number one. All are on a shuttle, and the shuttle crashes because they can't have electronics, and most of it is from their perspective spread out in 4 different places on this primitive world, while we also have like Hammer and the crew trying to get to them. So
that's not a novelization. That's just its own.
No, this is just a novel. It's really good by John Jackson Miller.
Okay.
I recommend it. Like I said, it's the only Strange New Worlds novel they've released thus far, but it's a really good novel. I enjoyed it a lot. We get some backstory. We find out the runabouts are only 2 years old, which I guess explains why we never saw them in Next Gen until... Like, we did see them once in Next Gen, but after DS9 premiered.
I was waiting for him to say, it's like a shuttle, but they didn't.
They're not.
Because I know it's a
like
little
more
different.
than a shuttle.
Yeah.
There's so much more. I love the runabouts. I really wish we got more of the In fact, it really bumps me out that Next Gen showed us more of the runabout than DS9 ever did with the modular, whatever. The other thing that I bumped on in this discussion of what did we miss in the last 10 years is they mention a sport called soccer. How did that term survive into the 24th century when 90% of the world calls it football? Is America's influence so damn strong that the rest of the world finally gives up and says, okay, we'll call it soccer too.
In 1993 or 94, I think we're in 94 now, right? Maybe?
Yeah.
Or 95.
Yeah, this is 94.
It makes sense, but yeah.
It doesn't, though. Even then, it doesn't make sense. Only the fact that it's written by Americans is it halfway.
That's what I mean. That makes sense. That part of it makes sense. The actual happening in the none of that makes sense. But I do like Cisco being a sports fan.
Well, he's a baseball fan. I don't think he'll ever mention soccer again. Nor should he.
Well, he was just trying to be nice. That's why he went along with their soccer thing. He meant to correct them, but he was just trying to get along. Yeah. And this is around the time I wrote down, and it gets answered very quickly, but I'm like, are these just hippies? Like, that are just like, we dig this thing? Or is it a cult? Oh, yep, it's a cult.
Amish. It's an Amish cult. No, you're right. It's more cult than Amish. It's definitely not hippies. Led by Alexis, played by Gail Strickland, who is a familiar face for sure.
So many
the American
credits.
President. A couple episodes of Dark Shadows, Who'll Stop the Rain. She has 96 credits, mostly guest star spots, but very familiar face.
She's in The Drowning Pool with Paul Newman. And
a couple episodes of Seinfeld.
Yep, she is. She's the one who talks about Grace at length with Elaine. And then Elaine lets her borrow Peterman's racket, and then she tries to get it back, and then it's a whole thing. But yeah, and then she was in one of the better episodes in the later seasons of MASH, Bottoms Up, which is about
Captain Helen Whitfield.
Yeah. And she was in the Night Court pilot also.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she was. Yeah.
She's
lots of stuff.
Yeah. So I really like her, and I so that may have been some of the appeal for me. Her character ends up being annoying, awful, and shady. Yeah. And yeah, I think I'll go with and I almost wish they'd gone more to this, because at some point I wrote down she's kind of like Kurtz in Apocalypse Now, and I thought this was to a certain extent, it was a better version of some of our crazy captains, commodores from the original series, where it's like, let's do the Nazis thing, or let's do the Roman Empire thing. It ends up still being the same kind of like, no, we're probably going to get sued for this, but then it also made me think of L. Ron Hubbard when we got just down to her ideas and stuff, kind of a thing. And then with the whole box thing, I'm like, oh, now we're into a Cool Hand Luke scenario here, where Cisco's like, you can't beat me. You cannot beat, and she didn't. But so I thought there was a lot of those elements. So
the box thing and the working on the farm very much reminded me of Plantation and racial history of the U.S.
That made it uncomfortable.
And yeah, it did. And the colonists weren't all white. There was some small amount of diversity. And while initially she put Cisco in there, I don't think there was any obvious racial overtone. You just felt it anyway.
Yeah.
And so my alternate episodes, it's Roots, but that's also because Avery Brooks was in the Roots the Gift Christmas special, which we need to watch at some point. We will watch it because it's got like 5 Star Trek actors in it, including LeVar Burton's version of Kunta Kinte. So yeah, he plays a slave in Roots the Gift, where Kate Mulgrew, aka Captain Janeway from Voyager, is the slave catcher that catches him. So we had the Starfleet captain catching the Starfleet commander, both before either one did Star Trek. LeVar Burton's in it, Tim Russ is in it, so at least 4 Star Trek actors.
My alternate episode is much darker. It's Jonestown. It's they don't just drink the Kool-Aid, they literally drink the Kool-Aid. So and that's, I guess, I'm jumping way ahead, but I didn't see the ending going where it went, and I'm still not sure what happened.
Like the ending, and we'll get to that when we get to that.
Okay.
I have big problems with the ending.
In my mind, to an extent, at the end is like, nope, we're still going to drink the Kool-Aid even though she's gone. But we'll get into it more in depth.
Yeah. So when we're introduced to this colony, though, she basically says, like, not forcing anyone to stay. Everybody's free to leave. And yet she is forcing. It becomes very clear that this whole like mentality, and she talks about working for their supper and they're fine with that. And I get why they're fine with that. Like at first they seem friendly and it seems fine. Yeah. But that line early on about 2 more strong, healthy men will bring a lot to the community is where immediately you're like, crap, these guys are dangerous.
Well, she says something later about we're very short-handed out there. I'm like, how can you be short-handed? You know how many people you have. What do you mean you're short-handed? That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
I guess a lot of the stuff she says doesn't really make sense.
No, she's awful. Yeah. Starting with the way she spells her name, because her name's Alexis, but it's spelled Alixus.
Yeah, but I wrote Alexis too. And I was like, wait a minute,
Alexis?
What? Yeah.
My speaker's trying to respond to me, but we'll leave Daxakira for a while. Let's just deal with the planet all at once. But Alexis is apparently a prolific author. She's written all these books about mankind and saying they're lazy and dull. I mean, the joke about Keiko saying O'Brien is lazy and dull just makes me sad for their marriage again. It doesn't make me feel better.
The O'Brien, my wife joke, yeah.
It was bad. Boy. But the whole, like, she found time to write all these books. Why are they shorthanded in the field? Is it because she's writing all these books instead of working in the field?
Yeah, what's going on in the field? I mean, I know they're growing crops and everything, but...
Yeah, that's basically it. They're supporting their basic way of life. I really, really bumped on, and I'm looking to see where this is. She talks about... Hang on, let me find this note because it's super relevant here. When O'Brien is caught and punished, it's because he selfishly wasted time. And how dare you spend your energy on trying to escape this place? But it's that thing about, it's that Puritan mentality that is ruining the United States of America in 2023. Where you're not supposed to take time off. You're not supposed to take your vacation days. You're not supposed to relax at all. It's all about the work. And I am so sick of that capitalistic bullcrap that as soon as she said it, and certainly not a perspective I would have brought last time I watched this episode.
Yeah.
But at this day and age, I was so angry as soon as she brings up, you're wasting your time, which is the greatest crime you can do. And I'm like, a freaking billionaire wrote this episode. Let me tell you. Billionaires who were sitting in their office playing golf. I know that doesn't make sense, sitting in their office and playing golf. They were doing both. They were watching TV, they were playing golf, while making everybody else do the manual labor and complaining that nobody wants to work anymore, so we're short-handed.
Very Calvinistic approach.
Oh, it's so disgusting.
Yeah.
It made me nauseous. She's definitely a Republican. She definitely supports Donald Trump. She also is so intent on making them get rid of their uniform, like as a symbol. Yeah. She's so much more concerned about symbols than reality. Basically, like she would let Sisko and O'Brien get away, I think, with wasting their time as long as they talked the talk and changed out the uniform, as long as they pretended. But that's part of the thing. Like Sisko and O'Brien, especially Sisko, O'Brien too, but especially Sisko in this episode, has such this strong moral code and center. He won't even pay lip service to her. I mean, we see the woman come to him, Cassandra, played by Julia Nixon. We'll get to her in just a second.
Yep.
And he's out of uniform, but before he goes and talks to Alexis, he puts it back on. And then from then on, he is not taking it off. And first of all, good on him. He's a great heroic captain, even though I think he takes it too far, and you don't need to sacrifice your life to prove the point. As he is willing to do.
Well, I think that's where we get to the cool hand loop kind of, I'm going to defend you no matter what.
Yeah, I liked that it was a battle of the wills. I like that he was so stubborn, but I also think it's not worth dying in the heat box to prove a point.
Agreed.
So Cassandra, I mentioned, played by Julia Nixon.
Mhm.
Honestly, it was really interesting because when the episode started, after the credits that were at the bottom of the screen,
Uh-huh.
she was the first guest star name. They gave her name, and they didn't do that for like Alexis or anybody else. I mean, I guess she's best known for Babylon 5, just 3 episodes. Full House, just 4 episodes. China Cry, True Story, Life Tastes Good. She's got 61 credits. She was in Ready Player One.
Her big first picture was Rambo, First Blood Part 2. So that was her big entree. And I thought
does that justify her being held above the other guest stars? She was barely in the episode.
Surprised. Well, when I saw it, I was like, oh, this means love for Cisco. She's the love interest. And then when she shows up, I'm like, okay. And then he's like, you're here to be a concubine or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I guess she isn't the love interest. Yeah. So I'm with you, Jimmy. I was surprised too. I mean, I appreciate Julia Nixon, and she was fine in Rambo and all that. But yeah, Gail Strickland's in this episode. I feel like, I mean, she is the episode.
Right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Cassandra Julia was in a previous episode of Star Trek. She was in a season 1 episode of The Next Generation. The Arsenal of Freedom, where she played an ensign.
Okay. I thought we did.
But
she'd seen.
Yeah, just once. So these are her only 2 Trek credits. But yeah, it felt very odd that she was highlighted the way she was in the credits.
Mm-hmm.
She has a good agent. I think that's the bottom line there. The box thing, discipline versus torture, that's also sickening. That harkens back to slave days and plantations and crap.
And like I said, I keep thinking about Spend a Night in the Box, and they literally call it the box, which is the Kohanlu thing.
Yeah.
And I froze it and went back because it's interesting. There's writing on there when, I'm sure it's there the whole time, but Cisco gets in it and it says, I thought it said something for torture, and it says, fill to this line or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Which is even more disturbing. Like, what are they?
Well, I don't think the fill this line had anything to do with what they're using it for now.
Right. Which is what I figured out. I was like, oh, okay. That's, yeah.
I mean, the whole thing is she's giving them the illusion of freedom without giving them freedom.
Right.
But they all agreed to it. They all agreed this punishment.
And she just talks and just, there's no necessarily, she's like, well, we all agreed to this. And this is, it's all nonsense. It's all just.
But their agreement is probably, anybody want to go against me? Nope. Well, we've all agreed now.
Yeah. And to be fair, I don't know how I feel. I don't know if I wanted to know, maybe it doesn't matter whether I want to know right away that, oh, she's the bad guy, or do I want to know later that she's a bad person? I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I mean, I remember this episode saying right away, but yeah. They mentioned her as the Cassandra comes in to seduce Ben. Alexis doesn't believe in doors. That there is a red flag. Majorly.
Yeah.
Like, you're not allowed to have privacy?
Yeah. It's just like
that's because you could be pleasuring yourself, and that would be wasting time. That would be a greatest sin.
This is true. I wrote it because, it's just like the Enterprise policy. But
no, because the Enterprise, the doors weren't locked, but there were still doors.
They were doors. Yeah. She doesn't have an open door policy. She has a no door policy.
I did like the way Cisco framed it. Very, very friendly to the 90s television censors. Did she send you here to make love to me? I mean, it sounds absolutely ridiculous, but very friendly to the 90s TV censors. Testing Cisco, like the whole Battle of the Wills, when she makes him work his shift after he gets out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
God, I just wanted to strangle her. At that point, again, I know Cisco's portrayed as the hero here, but to me, and I really hate to say this because Cisco's my favorite captain. I love the hero ethic he puts out. I love his moral stance. I love that he's willing to bend at the right times, which we'll get to more of as the series goes on. But to me, that is putting pride and toxic masculinity over common sense. I think at that point, it's more heroic to just say, yep, I'm going to take a nap, than to say, nope, I'm tough, so I'm going to work a shift. And that rubbed me the wrong way this time because my views on masculinity and stuff have changed in the last 15 years.
I just saw it as a Cool Hand Luke thing, which I like Cool Hand. So I just saw it as a, you can't beat me down,
Yeah.
Ain't gonna break my stride, or whatever you want to call it.
No one's gonna run me down.
although part of me was just like, I thought the same thing, that he was just gonna be like, nah, you know what? I'm not gonna work in the field. This ends now.
Yep.
And it's like, well, what's her end game? Well, I guess her end game is
She's trying to break him.
yeah.
She wants to break him. I mean, the whole thing where he gets out of the box and she's like, here's your glass of water. You're not allowed to drink it till you take off the clothes. Then she leaves, which is such a power move to be like, I'm not even going to monitor you. I'm just telling you what the rules are.
Yeah.
And he obeys, which is bull. He should, in my headcanon, he drank the whole pitcher of water before he came out.
What I thought was going to go
to common sense. But I don't think we were meant to think he did that. I think we were meant to think he's tough, which again, toxic masculinity, not good tough.
Well, and I guess this question gets answered later, which is, could that colony, and whatever it is, 40 people, but a lot of kids and women, not to disparage women, they can
only a couple of kids, but yeah,
at least 2. Yeah. And then they kill off, well, I guess she wasn't a kid, she was a woman, but, Cisco and O'Brien, no, they're Starfleet trained officers.
Yeah.
They can take those guys.
Yeah.
Probably pretty easily.
Yeah.
And there's not a prime directive or anything going on here. There's no reason for them not to.
No, these are human colonists from Earth. No prime directive. Well, we didn't even talk about, I guess, last week when we talked about thine own image or whatever, we didn't even talk about prime directive and how it should have applied but didn't because he lost his memory, which was a nice workaround.
Directive. You're right. That's
not to get into that episode again, but wasn't that like a fun way to just circumvent the whole thing and not deal with it?
Yeah, so I guess that's the way around. It's just always like, I don't remember anything that happened down there. You violated the prime directive. Did I? Yeah. I don't remember. That does sound like something Kirk might have done once.
Yes. So Siska goes back in the box for no reason other than pride and ego. Well, no, I mean, okay. I'm not being fair. I'm going to admit right now, I'm not being fair. My just gut instinct to push against any toxic masculinity. He is doing it very publicly to show the people that there are other options and you don't have to obey. And that is heroic and that is good. I just hope he drank his water first.
And I guess that gets around to, we'll get to it, but yeah, it feels like, and I do like that it did subvert my expectations because I thought it was building to him being like, breaking the spell, and he kind of did, but he didn't.
No, he didn't. Well, that's part of the problem. O'Brien asked Joseph for help. Joseph, played by Steve Vinovich, best known for Godfather of Harlem, The Intern, and The Worth. He has 111 IMDb credits.
That guy's been in all over the place.
He looks super familiar, but again, not a household name. Yeah. And this is his only Trek credit.
Yeah.
So, no Seinfeld. So that Joseph seems reasonable. Joseph seems like, here's our in. He won't outwardly help O'Brien, but he won't stop him, which is a positive sign. I guess that makes the ending even worse that it's him that's so brainwashed, because it seems like he's not brainwashed at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, well, we've only paid these 3 guest stars, so it has to be one of them. It can't be anybody else.
Well, yeah, 2 things there. One is that we know that O'Brien can painlessly knock somebody out, like a Vulcan nerve pinch. And 2, that part of the ending, at first I'm like, oh, is he just saying we really like it here? But
no, he's like, brainwashed. He's so brainwashed.
Going. Yeah, which...
The fact that they're all so brainwashed that none of them, I know I'm skipping ahead, none of them want to leave, even after she's arrested and carted away, and her son, because he, tried to kill O'Brien. Yeah. So of course they got him too. Mm-hmm. Those 2 are carted away, and nobody is still willing to stand up to her. And Joseph is like, nope, we're continuing. It makes no sense to me. Yeah. It's like so brainwashed. It's so gaslit. It's so awful. They're Republicans in 2024 that are still voting for Trump after everything. But why? But the fact that the whole colony, without an exception, the only thing that saves that for me is she clearly carefully planned this mission and this crew. And maybe she only chose personalities she know would go along with this.
Oh, that makes sense in a cult type of thing, for sure.
She was the leader of this mission. She planned it all out. She picked this planet. She picked everything. She only picked people that would follow.
Well, and she does give that horrible speech about you'd still be doing this and you'd just be doing this if it wasn't for me, which, I think that goes to that too, that she selectively groomed or whatever.
Which also explains why the only two people that are against this are the two children at the end that stand
like,
stare.
what just happened? Yeah.
Because they were born into this. They're 10 years old or less. They were born in this colony. And they were never given the choice. Everybody else was selected because of their personality. These two children were not. I think that's it. I think she chose her colonists.
So yeah, I think that's a good analogy. Do we think those kids then are like, there's more to this than more to the universe than this? Or
I think those kids are, it doesn't have to be this way. We can have a life beyond this. We should go. I really wish there was a follow-up episode. Maybe if Star Trek had gone on longer, because we did Voyager, which was on the other side of the galaxy, and Enterprise, which was in the past. If we did another Trek series in this era, I would have loved to have seen them grown up and get off that planet.
Wouldn't they send back, I'm trying to think the right term, Child Protective Services back there?
They should. They absolutely should.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're going to see some pretty crazy colonists here in DS9 and Next Gen before it's over. The Maquis has not been introduced yet. They're a huge thing that we're going to discuss a lot. That has to do with cultural movements and bucking against Starfleet and the Federation and seeing the people that get left behind. But man, this episode is a precursor to that in a way that's just rough.
Are they the ones that have been referenced, the Maquis, or no? I'm thinking of something else.
They've been referenced. But essentially, the Maquis are a group, to give you the short explanation, and I know they're going to be introduced before Next Gen's off the air, so soon. And they're very heavily in DS9 and Voyager. Basically, in the Federation-Cardassian Treaty, the Federation ceded some worlds that had been settled by Federation colonists to the Cardassians, and these settlers refused to give up their planets. So they are, according to Starfleet and the Federation, a terrorist organization that, rather than give up their homes, have created an army to fight back. And that's going to be a plot point in DS9 and major structural plot point in both DS9 and Voyager, but it's going to be introduced in Next Gen before it leaves. So to those colonists that just don't fit in the system and can't find a way to exist in the system, I feel like there's been so many Star Trek episodes that came up to this, like this one, that come up to that line without going to its natural conclusion. And the Maquis are like, we've seen all these episodes, let's take it a step further.
All right.
But yeah, that half the main characters in Voyager are Maquis. DS9 is going to deal with the Maquis a lot. So yeah, we'll get to it. Okay. We'll get to it. We're going to have a couple familiar faces of characters we know be Maquis. Like, it's a thing. Yeah, yeah.
Do we think there are other people on this planet? Because they say it's an M planet.
No. It's just this colony.
Yeah,
I think. So jumping back, because now we got really passionate about the ending and stuff. But O'Brien's detector, that was pretty neat with the gourd in the water. That's fun.
I like that. I liked O'Brien to the rescue. I enjoyed that entire segment.
You like his scarecrow? Man, he can strip up his uniform fast.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
That camera didn't even cut. And there's the uniform hanging.
Well, and I thought, and I don't think that's why they cast Julia Nixon, but the stuff that he did like that were very Rambo.
Yeah.
Were very Rambo type exploits. So I liked it on that level, connecting that.
I did like him shooting off the lock and rescuing Cisco dramatically of like, how do you think this phaser works? She's been lying.
And I wish she
stops them, which again goes even more into the why are you staying if you know it's wrong?
Right. Yeah. I want him to shoot and hurt people. Not hurt people, but scare people. Now, again, not that I'm a gun person, but in this instance, I think it's okay to scare them. Like, are you crazy?
It's the whole thing where she wraps it up by just admitting it. I planned it all, and it's just, she is so sure they're going to support her. And that's where I'm like, they shouldn't be supporting her. She should be wrong. Right. I think the writers thought they were so clever by let's set this up that she's totally exposed and they all fall behind her. Yeah. But to me, it doesn't seem clever. It just seems sad.
Oh, I think that's their thing. I mean, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, but it's like, we're living in a world where Trump's going to jail in 4 different courts,
but Trump wouldn't surrender the way she surrendered. I guess we didn't see all the appeals. I guess we didn't see that she was only in jail to take a mugshot, then she came back to the planet, then she didn't even show up for half the trials because she was on X tweeting about Xing about crooked the prosecution and the judges were.
trying to find her next colony of folks. Yeah, but it's not a perfect analogy for sure, but it's definitely very much. I mean,
to her, it's like my experiment succeeded.
Yeah,
I don't care if I get arrested. I'm proven right. I'm in the history.
You're right. Yeah, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. And I think that's. I guess that's where the 5 writers landed.
It's my sense of justice and fairness and righteousness that is so offended so often in the modern world that balks against this episode, that rubs against this episode. The fact that she doesn't get her comeuppance, even the fact that she's arrested is not a comeuppance. I feel dissatisfied with the ending.
But I think that's where they were going. Is like, yep, this is how it ends. I mean, this is how it ends. It doesn't end.
So I will say I've told Zoe, my daughter, because she's like, why do you like something that upsets you? Because we've talked about this with other stuff. I'm like, if you make me feel something, even if it's negative emotions, if you've made me feel, you've done a great job as a show. And I almost feel like now I need to be kinder to this episode of the ranking because I clearly has made me feel a lot. Yet I don't want to be because I'm so mad.
I'm trying to think of what I was listening to and who said it, but they were like, and I know you're not a big sports guy, but they were like, we don't watch sports because it makes us happy. We watch sports because it makes us feel something. And I was like, yeah, I do. But it's a lot more fun when it makes me happy. But where I am now, it's a lot easier for me to, it's the sorry for talking about it, because they have a sports comedy show. And I think I've gotten better. I'm much better now at walking away from it. But during the 3.5 hours of the Eagles game, you've seen me. And it was a Super Bowl, so you've really seen me. And, they lost this most recent Super Bowl. You were there when they won, which I'm still living in that. They lost the most recent one, and that still stings when I see it. But, they lost last Sunday. And the next day, or later that night, I'm back to doing whatever, whereas I'd say, over time, I've gotten better about it. I'm still very passionate and into it in the moment. And it definitely they lost last week, so my excitement in general was dampened about them, but not about life. But ideally I
mean, all of Columbus gets depressed when the Buckeyes lose.
Yes, and that's not. I know, but I know there are times where I reach that level where definitely Eagles fans and as a Mets fan or whatever fans in general reach that level. But you have to. But as soon as that game's over, maybe not as soon, but soon after, there's too many other things in life that I enjoy and I have to get back to. But now if they win, then everything's great. So but it's the same kind of thing, But
I like a show that can make me cry. I guess I don't like something that's so frustrating. And then, it's realistic that she got away with it, but to a certain extent. But
and that's that. Yeah, then we're almost getting into the Star Wars part of the podcast where everyone gets mad about everything in Star Wars. Nobody. The internet. But
I've got like 3 notes about how they're all Dax and Kira plots. So if you've got
that's what I was going to say. We haven't talked about. I enjoyed all that. I enjoyed those two being together. Yeah. So they
had that great episode in season 1 where they were on the ramshackle shuttle together, and then their friendship didn't feel earned with the whole Kira leaving thing. But now I'm keep developing this friendship.
And just to go to your point, I would rather give us another 5-7 minutes of these guys out in space on the way there rather than and it's.
I don't think you could cut anything from the Cisco O'Brien plot, though. They condensed it as much as they could.
I think you're right. Because we didn't get too much into the torture, and I hate torture porn.
No, we didn't get fluff or filler. We got the beats that we needed. Yeah.
I still would have just liked to see those two together. Sure. I like the conversations and the.
I love the beginning where we find out Dax plays poker with admirals. Yep. And frequently beats them, and that Ben Sisko can't bluff, which makes total sense for Ben Sisko.
Yes, it does.
The whole Rio Grande is that warp thing, and they have to stop it because we find out that Alexis actually sent their runabout away, which they still never explained how she did that.
I don't understand that either.
Well, they didn't put the lock on it; they just left it sitting there. I guess I don't know, but.
Did she turn off the duonetics thing so she could do that and then turned it back on?
She must have.
I guess
she must have.
She knows where it is.
But they have the thing where Kira Kira's like, I'm going to beam over. Dex like, at warp? Do you have a better idea? What's my job to have a better idea? I love scientists. I always love scientist Dex.
Yep.
But did it seem more risky to try to grab the shuttle out of warp than to just beam over at warp? We've seen beaming before. It's worked.
I like the whole, I hope these guys didn't have an off day when they put this together. I love that whole conversation, but I'm with you. Is this absolutely necessary? Is this our only possibility?
It also seems scarier than I think it was. Like, it didn't really seem that dangerous, but they tried to make it seem dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
It shook the shuttle a bit. Okay.
Yeah.
They talk about
I wish something had fallen off or something.
Right.
A little more stress. Yep.
The part that did make sense to me, I feel like this is a major plot hole, is they are able to check the trajectory it came from to know that it almost to the sun and missed it. And they figured that out. But aren't there logs that they can just check its course in the runabout computer? Because I get that Alexis could send it away, but to have her like also alter the logs did not feel like that made a lot of sense.
Yes, that does make sense.
I mean, I guess she lived in the 24th century. So, and while runabouts didn't exist, Starfleet computers did. So she could have had that knowledge, but there was never any explanation or discussion of that. It just was there.
That seems like a lot for her to be able to do.
And they didn't mention the logs were wiped, which I think would have been seen and noticed. So are we just supposed to believe it doesn't automatically track where it's gone?
Yeah.
Oh,
I didn't understand that entire part of that.
It was dumb.
Yeah.
It was dumb. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think we've covered all my stuff as well. We covered the ending in depth.
Okay. Yeah. We have. Sorry, this I got heated. Just never liked this episode. I've never liked this episode. So anyway,
well, hopefully we can find some middle ground. I didn't love it, but I did like it. But you have swayed me in some ways for sure.
I didn't hate it as much as I have in past viewings, but I still don't like it. I'm angrier than I've been in past viewings, and that is why I don't hate it as much, because I'm angrier. I don't know. That's bizarre, but
and O'Brien does call it Paradise.
I appreciate that a little bit. Yeah,
he's not here, but O'Brien did say Paradise. So
yeah.
He said,
"Who was your shady character?"
Alexis,
of course,
and not just
of course.
The way she spells her name. She's also my annoying character. But I also, we talked about the reasons a lot of her stuff doesn't make sense, and maybe it's just because I like Gail Strickland, but I just thought she hit the right note of like, oh, I want to punch you, but you were so slimy and so good at this. And maybe the actress is really good at portraying it.
She was.
And Alexis, I'm thinking Alexis is just so manipulative, so awful. It's just, but
she was definitely my annoyance, but she was not my
shady.
Or sorry, she was definitely my shady. She was not my annoyance.
Yeah,
because I decided to make my annoyance Joseph.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because he would not help and then turned on him.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't consistent character writing for him.
Yeah,
I thought it should have been a little more heroic.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you having a drink with?
Dax. She was fun. She was telling those stories. I want to hear more.
I do too, but I'm going to have a drink with Ben, and it's going to be water. Because he needs it.
I like that.
And even though I got really frustrated in retrospect of the toxic masculinity stuff we've talked about, I still think we haven't had a lot of good chances to see him being a hero. And the taking a stand in public in front of her is still a heroic moment, despite my reservations about the way he went about it.
Yeah.
And we're going to see a lot more heroic Cisco as the series goes on. It's funny, we're 2 seasons in, and very few of the episodes have starred him the way like McCarthy was so frustrated. But I will say the longer the series goes on, the more the series focuses on him. Like he's really the center of later seasons.
All right.
So obviously Avery Brooks would not be my favorite captain if he continued to have the contribution he's had to date.
Fair enough.
So ranking the episode. Oh God. Let's put it against last week's, because that's our bottom right now. Whispers. Better or worse than Whispers?
Pretty sure I'm on above. Whispers.
The Tho O'Brien.
Oh yeah, the Hitchcock. Yeah. Well, what's above that? Because I'm not sure where I land on
The Laura.
I'd probably go above those two.
I mean, I'll give you Whispers. Not sure I want to give you Melora, honestly. Let's see how far you want to go, and then we'll talk. Second Sight.
I'll probably say I could go either way at that point. At that point, probably.
Okay.
What's above that one?
For purposes of ranking, I'd say we go below that because it doesn't leave either one of us quite satisfied.
Yeah, that's perfect. Like this episode.
Yeah. Above that, just for reference, is Rivals. So as long as you want to stay below that, I think we're good.
That's the one with the competing bar too. So that episode was fun for sure.
Okay.
I'll go below. I'm
divided on Melora. You're divided on Second Sight, so put it right in the middle. But yeah, I'll definitely give you It's Spare the Whispers. So it definitely got me a lot more worked up than Melora got me worked up. So we'll give it credit in that regard. Next week, we are going back to Next Generation for Masks, which I believe our special guest will return. Metatrek. Check out YouTube's Metatrek channel, patreon.com/Metatrek. Want to keep plugging him because we liked him.
Yeah, great.
Investigating a rogue comet that's been traveling through the universe for over 87 million years, Picard discovers alien beings within the comet, which infest the computer systems on the Enterprise as well as Data. So we have another Data episode, another possessed Data episode.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it too. But our friend at Metatrek said this is one that really stands out to him about the season. He was right about Thine Own Self. That gave us a lot to talk about. It was not a bad episode. So
that's true.
That makes me a little bit more optimistic about Masks.
I'll withhold judgment.
Yep. Until then, live long.
Or you spend it right in the box and prosper.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?